5 minutes.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Firstly, I want to congratulate Minister Coffey on his appointment as Minister and wish him success in dealing with housing. I believe that the government does understand the problems that people are facing in terms of housing, from people living with the threat and reality of homelessness to families who cannot find affordable properties to rent or to purchase. The housing challenge is significant. The Construction 2020 target of tripling annual housing output over the next 6 years and the housing agency's estimates of some 35,000 additional residential properties being required over the next 5 years to meet social housing need show the scale of the challenge that is before us. While it's important to recognise these issues, I believe that it's just as important not to panic people in terms of the housing market. Property in Dublin fell by over 50% during the peak of the boom, and it is still significantly below those peak rates. In terms of immediate action, 6,000 households will have their social housing needs met this year. The claims of another property boom are, I believe, exaggerated. The recent story in Swords of people camping out overnight in order to put down a deposit appears to be a once-off event, and I understand that on the day of the sales of that development opened, the houses had not sold out on the first day. It may well have been something that was hyped by the developer. The social housing strategy under the stewardship of Minister Alan Kelly is in preparation and will be finalised and published with Budget 2015. I'm not going to start preempting the final strategy, but clearly it will need to address supply by coming up with solutions that must include a more ambitious build programme and the facilitation of increased private sector construction, and it will need to examine funding solutions, including the best mix of state funding, private finance and EU sources of funding. New social housing stock is being added. Old stock is being reactivated that needed refurbishment, and it will continue to add to this stock. Through a considerable refurbishment programme, almost 2,000 social housing units are back in use in 2014, and another 1,200 social units will go back in use in 2015, and more units to follow. The social housing strategy will provide us with a programme to continue this work. Significant development and new builds has started already. New social housing developments are starting all around the country. In Dublin, for example, there are 38 new units being built in Glasnevin, and the new public housing initiative is being progressed by Dublin City Council with the voluntary sector and with the assistance of Minister Kelly's department. For example, 2 large schemes of 50 units and 130 units, where a mix of private rented and socially rented units are being provided side by side in my own constituency in the Dublin North Fringe. This is the kind of innovation we need and we must continue with. The government's commitment to tackling homelessness is laid out in the Homeless Policy Statement published last year, which outlines our aim to end long-term homelessness by the end of 2016. This means transitioning from a shelter-led to a more sustainable housing-led approach, which is about accessing permanent housing as the primary response to all forms of homelessness. In the past 2 years in Dublin, some 1,500 people have moved from homeless services to independent living with necessary supports. This shows what can be done. There is much more to be done, and I fully recognise that, and that is a challenge. This is why an oversight group was established to review the approach advocated in the Homeless Policy Statement, to identify obstacles and to propose solutions to them. This in turn led to the approval by government in May of this year of a major implementation plan containing 80 actions, which will contribute to the delivery of 2,700 units of accommodation by the end of 2016. These actions include ensuring that vacant properties are brought into productive use as quickly as possible and prioritising vulnerable groups, including homeless households, for housing, and as well as bringing other suitable vacant residential properties in state ownership into use as quickly as possible. In conclusion, I wish to raise the question of the repossession of buy-to-let properties by banks. People renting being made homeless as a result of repossession of buy-to-let properties by banks should be allowed to remain in situ where the property is being purchased by another investor. And I believe legislation to protect tenants in this situation should be considered. I support the work of the government, and I will be playing my part in ensuring that the housing crisis is tackled and resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy.